In this video, I'm going to show you how we can solve the quadratic equations by completing the square method. The idea of the completing a square method is to convert a quadratic equation like this, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, to the form of x plus or minus a number, say that number is p, squared equal q. And then we can solve this new form easily. But how we can convert a quadratic equation to this form? I will show you how we can do this by doing some examples. As the first example, consider this quadratic equation. X squared plus 6x minus 16 equals 0. We want to solve this equation with the completing the square method. Note that we can solve this quadratic equation easily with the factoring method or with the quadratic formula. But here our focus is solving quadratic equations with the completing the square method. The first step is to move the constant of the quadratic equation, which in this case is negative 16, to the other side of the equation. If we move negative 16 to the other side, we have 16. The next step is to add a number to the left side and the right side of the equation. But what is the number that we have to add to the left and right side of this equation? Always the number that we add to the left and right side of the equation is divide the coefficient of x, which in this case is 6, by 2. So always divide this number, the coefficient of x, by 2 and square it. 6 divided by 2 in this case is 3. 3 squared is 9. So we have to add 9 to the left side and the right side of this equation. Note that 16 plus 9 is 25. So in the right side we have 25, and in the left side we have x squared plus 6x plus 9. Now we can write this trinomial in the form of a complete square. We can write x squared plus 6x plus 9 as x plus 3 all squared equal 25. But where this 3 comes from, always divide the coefficient of x, which in this case is 6, by 2 and put it in the bracket. So this number is always half of this number. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now we could convert the quadratic equation to the desired form. We have x plus 3 squared equals 25. After we get to this form, we have to take a square root from the left side and the right side of the equation. If we take a square root from left side and the right side of this equation, we have x plus 3 equal plus minus 5. Note that square root of 25 is 5. And don't forget to put plus minus. Now we have two equations. X plus 3 is 5 and x plus 3 is negative 5. In the first equation, if we move this 3 to the other side of the equation, it gets negative 3. 5 minus 3 is 2. So from the first equation, x is 2. And from the second equation, if we move this 3 to the other side, we have negative 5 minus 3. Don't forget, when we move positive 3 to the other side, The other side of the equation, it gets negative 3. Minus 5 minus 3 is negative 8. So these are the two answers of this quadratic equation. Let's do another example. X squared minus 10x plus 21 equals 0. Again, the first step is to move the constant, which in this case is 21, to the other side of the equation, and it gets negative 21. Then we have to add a number to the left side and the right side of the equation. How we have to find that number? Always divide coefficient of x, which in this case is negative 10, by 2, square it. Negative 10 over 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So we have to add 25 to the left side and the right side of the equation. Negative 21 plus 25 is 4. So we have x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 4. Now note that we can write this as x minus 5 squared equals 4. And again, where this negative 5 comes from, divide this number, negative 10, by 2 and put it here, which is negative 5. Now that we converted the quadratic equation to the complete square form, we can take a square root from the left side and the right side of the equation. If we take a square root from the left side of the equation, we have x minus, and a square root of 4 is 2, and don't forget plus minus. So plus minus 2. Now we have two equations. X minus 5 is 2, x minus 5 is negative 2. If we move negative 5 to the other side of the equation, x is 5 plus 2, which is 7. And in the second equation, if we move negative 5 to the other side, x is 5 minus 2, which is 3. These are the two answers of this quadratic equation. Now let's do a bit more complicated example. X squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Again, the first step is to keep x squared and 3x in the left and move the constant, which in this case is negative 10, to the other side of the equation. So we have x squared plus 3x equals 10. The next step is to add a number to the left side and the right side of the equation. What is that number? Divide this. Divide the coefficient of x, which is 3, by 2 and square it. 3 over 2 squared is 9 over 4. Square 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4. So 3 over 2 squared is 9 over 4. So we add 9 over 4 to the left and right side of the equation. Note that 10 plus 9 over 4, if we do a simple common denominator between these two, the denominator of 10 is 1, the common denominator is 4. 4 times 10 is 40, plus 9, 40 over 4 plus 9 over 4 is 49 over 4. So we write the left side again, and 10 plus 9 over 4 is 49 over 4. And now we can write this as x plus, don't forget, as usual, divide this by 2, which is 3 over 2, put it here in the bracket, squared is 49 over 4. Now that we converted the quadratic equation to the complete square form, we are ready to take a square root from both sides of this equation to solve it. If we take a square root from both sides of the equation, we have x plus 3 over 2 equals to plus minus a square root of 49 over 4. Note that a square root of 49 is 7 and a square root of 4 is 2. So a square root of right side of the equation is 7 over 2. Now we have two equations. One equation is x plus 3 over 2 is 7 over 2. The other equation is x plus 3 over 2 is negative 7 over 2. In the first equation, if we move 3 over 2 to the other side of the equation, we have x equals 7 over 2 minus 3 over 2. Because the denominators are the same here, if we subtract numerators, 7 minus 3 is 4 and 4 over 2 is 2. So from the first equation, x is 2, and in the second equation, x is negative 7 over 2 minus 3 over 2. Minus 7 minus 3 is minus 10 over 2. Minus 10 over 2 is minus 5. So x is negative 5. So this quadratic equation has two solutions, and the answers are 2 and negative 5. Now let's do some examples that the coefficient of x squared is not 1. If you notice, in the previous examples that we did here, the coefficient of x2 in all the examples was 1. Here coefficient of x2 is 1. Here also coefficient of x2 is 1. And in the first example, the coefficient of x2 was 1. Now we want to do an example that the coefficient of x2 is not equal 1. Consider this quadratic equation. 2x2 minus 5x minus 3 is 0. We want to solve this quadratic equation with the completing the square method. Because in this equation, the coefficient of x2 is not 1, first we have to make the coefficient of x2 equal 1. And to do so, first we have to divide all the terms of this equation by 2. So first we have to divide every term of this equation by 2. So we have 2x2 over 2 minus 5x over 2 minus 3 over 2 equals 0. Note that also we divide the right side of the equation by 2, but 0 over 2 is 0. These two from numerator and these two from denominator cancel each other, so we have x squared minus 5x over 2 can be written as 5 over 2x minus 3 over 2 equals 0. Now we have a quadratic equation that coefficient of x2 is 1. Now we can solve this quadratic equation similar to our previous examples. First, we have to move the constant, which in this case is negative 3 over 2, to the other side of the equation. So we write x2 minus 5 over 2x, and we move negative 3 over 2 to the other side of the equation, is 3 over 2. The next step is to add a number to the left side and the right side of the equation. What is that number? As usual, we have to divide coefficient of x by 2 and square it. So we have to divide negative 5 over 2 by 2 and square it. But note that negative 5 over 2 divided by 2 is actually negative 5 over 4. because negative 5 over 2 divided by 2 is actually negative 5 over 2 times by reciprocal of denominator. Reciprocal of 2 is 1 over 2. If we multiply numerators, negative 5, and if we multiply denominators, we have 4. So negative 5 over 2 divided by 2 is negative 5 over 4. Don't forget, you have to square it. Negative 5 squared is 25 and 4 squared is 16. So the number that we have to add to the left side and the right side of this equation is 25 over 16. If we simplify 3 over 2 plus 25 over 16, we have this. The common denominator between 16 and 2 is again 16. If we multiply numerator and denominator by 8 to make the denominator 16, we have 24 in numerator and 25 here again. 24 plus 25 is 49 over 16. So 3 over 2 plus 25 over 16 is 49 over 16. So we have x squared minus 5 over 2x plus 25 over 16 is 49 over 16. Now we can write the expression in the left side of this equation as x minus 5 over 4 squared equals 49 over 16. But where this number comes from? As previous examples, we have to divide this number by 2 to find that number. If we divide negative 5 over 2 by 2, it equals negative 5 over 4. This is how we find that number. A common mistake that many students make here in this particular example is that for finding this number, they use the original equation for finding that number, and they divide this negative 5 by 2. Don't make this mistake and don't use the original equation for finding this number when the coefficient of x2 is not 1. Use the equation, this equation, that the coefficient of x2 is 1 for finding this number. Actually, you can use this equation also for finding this number. Just divide this number, the coefficient of x, by 2. Anyway, don't use the original equation for finding this number. Now that we converted the quadratic equation to the complete square form, we can take a square root from both sides of this equation for finding x. If we take a square root from the left side and the right side of this equation, we have x minus 5 over 4 equal to plus minus 7 over 4. Note that a square root of 49 over 16 is 7 over 4. Because a square root of 49 is 7, a square root of 16 is 4. Now we can write this as two separate equations. X minus 5 over 4 is 7 over 4, and the other equation is x minus 5 over 4 is negative 7 over 4. If we move negative 5 over 4 to the other side of the equation, x is 5 over 4 plus 7 over 4. 5 plus 7 is 12, 12 over 4 is 3. So one answer of this equation is 3. The other answer is x is 5 over 4 minus 7 over 4. 5 minus 7 is negative 2. Negative 2 over 4 or negative 1 over 2 is the other answer of this quadratic equation. Now let's do another example. 3x squared plus 2x minus 16 is 0. Because coefficient of x2 is not 1, first we divide all the terms by 3. If we divide every term by 3, these 3 and these 3 cancels, and so we have x squared plus 2 over 3x minus 16 over 3 equals 0. So the first step is to get rid of these 3 and make coefficient of x2 1. So we divide every term by 3 and we get to this equation. X squared plus 2 over 3x minus 16 over 3 equals 0. The next step, as usual, is to move the constant number to the other side of the equation. So we have x squared plus 2 over 3x equals 16 over 3. Now we have to add a number to the left side and the right side of this equation. How we have to find that number? As usual, we divide this number, the coefficient of x, this number, 2 over 3 by 2, and we square it. 2 over 3 divided by 2 is actually 2 over 3 times by reciprocal of denominator, which is 1 over 2, which is 2 times 1 or 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 over 6 is 1 over 3. The other way that you can find this 1 over 3, cancel these 2 with these 2 and you get 1 over 3. Anyway, 2 over 3 divided by 2 is 1/3. 1/3 squared is 1 over 9. So we have to add 1 over 9 to the both sides of the equation. 16 over 3 plus 1 over 9 can be simplified with a common denominator. The common denominator is 9. If we multiply top and bottom of this by 3, 16 times 3 is 48 plus 1. 48 plus 1 is 49 over 9. So 16 over 3 plus 1 over 9 is 49 over 9. And we write the left side of the equation as before. Now we can write this expression as x plus 1/3 squared equals 49 over 9. How we find this 1 over 3? We divided this 2 over 3 by 2. If we divide 2/3 by 2, 2 over 3 divided by 2 is 2 over 3 times 1/2, which is 1/3. That's how we find that number. And don't make this mistake to divide this by 2. Never use the original equation when the coefficient of x2 is not 1. Use one of these equations for finding this number. Now take a square root from both sides of the equation. If we take a square root, we have x plus 1/3 equals a square root of 49 over 9 is plus minus 7 over 3. We can write this as two separate equations. X plus 1/3 is 7 over 3 and x plus 1 over 3 is negative 7 over 3. If we move 1/3 to the other side, x is 7 over 3 minus 1 over 3, which is 6 over 3, and 6 over 3 is 2. That's one of the answers. The other answer is negative 7 over 3 minus 1 over 3, which is negative 8 over 3. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next videos. Thank you for watching.